Dear viewers, thank you for joining us. You're watching our weekly show, Talk to Obn. Today, we're going to discuss on current affairs, AU-led negotiation, joined by Public Relations Officer of Ethiopian American Civic Council, Asqual Tafri. Asqual, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Adis.
I appreciate it. Okay, what is your reflection on AU-led negotiation being undergone in South Africa, Johannesburg?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. Currently, I don't even call it a negotiation. I call it more like a talk because there's really no negotiation. TPLF terrorist group has been defeated. And usually when you go into a negotiation table, you go with either, how are you going to go to negotiate when you're already defeated? So are you negotiating from a position of strength or from a position of weakness? And currently, Ethiopia is negotiating from a position of strength. But TPLF is defeated. However, they have a strong ally. The West is pushing for Ethiopia to cave in. And I'm very happy to say that Ethiopian negotiation team is not caving in. And it definitely wants to protect its integrity and sovereignty. And it does have a full right to protect its sovereignty under international law. So basically, the only thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about our African country allies is that they seem to cave in as well under pressure from the West. So if you recall, African nations, we really went out and went to bat for Africa's independence, most African countries. So now Ethiopia is in need and they should support us 100%. So that's what I'm looking forward to happen, that African countries will come in support of Ethiopia.
Your council had worked a lot in revealing the reality to the global communities or the Western superpowers declines to take reality as it is. Can you just tell us major works had been undergone by your council in telling the reality for those who detest to accept it as it is?
Yeah, so Ethiopian American Civic Council has a sister organization called Unity for Ethiopia. If you recall, Unity for Ethiopia is a digital campaign that we launched about 2 years ago, exactly in November 2020, when, in fact, the TPLF terrorist group, before the war, went out here in digital media and started saying genocide. So we were already with Unity for Ethiopia. Since then, we have uninterrupted tweeting machine. Every day we tweet out. We have over 11,000 members within here and then internationally. So Unity for Ethiopia does a lot of advocating against the false narrative that's being pushed. In fact, we've seen a humongous amount, a rise of such false narrative ever since this negotiation or talk started. Yesterday, for example, the Holocaust Museum issued a statement on their Twitter saying that genocide is going to happen in Tigray. This is, mind you, this is the Holocaust Museum. You would think that they would do a little bit of research before they amplify the false narrative of TPLF. So we went out to bat immediately, did a lot of work, organized the public to go out and call the Holocaust Museum, call them and protest that it is wrong and actually it's false what they're doing. In addition to that, we continuously meet with senators and House of Representatives in order to actually tell the true story so they would understand what TPLF is all about. So we've done a lot of media work on the ground. Every week we have a Twitter space with a group, with several different groups on each Sunday night at 6 p.m. talking to our constituents, people that follow us all across the United States to vote. And Your vote is your power, but you need to know how to vote. So we're working on that. I'll go a little bit in detail about that if you're interested, but we are applying,
Okay.
responding in
We'll be
all,
talking about it
all
later on.
areas. Yeah.
Let me proceed to another question. I mean, South Africa is ushering the AU-led negotiation, and it's being hosted and led by African Union majorly. Can we say it's a manifestation of African solution for African problems, or their other hand is, especially from the West? What is your insight? Can we say it's a genuine AU-led negotiation, or there is infiltrated hand behind this scene?
Initially,
You got my point, right?
yes, I do. Initially, it looked like a genuine AU-led type of negotiation talks with Obasanjo. He's very pro-Ethiopian from what I could see. He seems to be fair, but I don't know what kind of hurdles we're facing behind the scenes. As you've seen and witnessed this week, Addis, it looks like the West, including the United States, is pressuring African countries. And then I really want to send a message. The Ethiopian government has done a good job actually responding lately to these issues. We have to actually let, South Africa and all these African countries that are part of the negotiation team know that Ethiopia paid a big price to render the freedom from colonizers. In fact, in 1962, Ethiopia sponsored Mandela, the Mandela to come out in 1962, and he was trained by Ethiopian military. In fact, he was given a pistol. In fact, his first ammunition to fight white colonialism was given to him by a general from Ethiopian military camp. That's hidden somewhere. He hid it right before he went to jail, and it's now worth 1.8 million because it meant a lot to him. We played a big part. We took a risk of giving up favor from the Western nation in order to rescue a freedom fighter like Mandela. We stood for them, and it's now their turn to stand for Ethiopia. And I think this message should be communicated to our African allies. Yes, looks like it's fair. Looks like initially they do support, but I see pressure. But one good thing is that Ethiopia is standing still amidst this pressure. They released a statement saying that our sovereignty is not negotiable, and it should not be negotiable. So this is something that we need to make clear to the negotiators and the players around this negotiation.
Okay, who's got the full leverage in this negotiation? Meaning that the Ethiopian federal government or the terrorist TPLF? You know what I mean?
Ethiopia has the upper hand.
All the play card go to the Ethiopian federal government, and it depends on the will of the federal government, I guess. Do you agree, though?
Yes, I absolutely agree. It depends on the will of the federal government because it is an absolute sovereign. Which country in the world will not defend itself against terrorists? Look, the TPLF general, Warada, I believe his name, went out on TV and said that I work with Somali insurgents. Who are Somali insurgents? They're Al-Shabaab. And Al-Shabaab is Al-Qaeda. And who's Al-Qaeda? A number one enemy of the United States. So in July, when they did the military operation to wipe out Al-Shabaab from Somalia, that should render a huge leverage for Ethiopia. I mean, the Horn of Africa is a very, very important place. And in the middle of it, like Diakon Yosef said today in a meeting, he said the gravity of the Horn of Africa is Ethiopia. You cannot have a Horn of Africa with Ethiopia. So yes, Ethiopia can actually leverage her sovereignty and the important major contribution it has to the stability and political stability, commercial, finance, business, whatever, you name it, and the Horn of Africa plays a big part. So it's not a country that you mistreat and literally get away with this if you're part of the Horn of Africa nation.
You've been heard so many times that accusing TPLF in so many ways, especially you've been saying disarming TPLF is the only solution to have peaceful Ethiopia. And would TPLF genuinely accept this request from the federal government in the talk?
Who is negotiating from a position of strength?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question we need to answer. If you look at it, Ethiopia is negotiating from a position of strength right now, military strength in all angles, economic. So yes, we can demand a disarm of TPLF. We can actually influence our neighbors in African countries and the West that this terrorist group is going to expand. It's a danger to the Horn. And the Horn of Africa is extremely interesting to the United States government because they want to balance out the power, access of power, Russia, China. They don't want, they want to play in Horn of Africa. And then the other thing that you could show clearly is that if TPLF is allowed to be emboldened and not be disarmed, it's going to join forces with Al-Shabaab and become a Boko Haram of the Horn of Africa. So the threat is not just contained in Ethiopia, it's going to spread to the rest of Africa. And that's truly a danger. And who's financing this is Egypt. Don't forget, there have been evidence after evidence to show that they are actually financing all of the terrorist group attacking Ethiopia right now.
Okay, recently different rallies and demonstrations have been undergone here in Ethiopia and diaspora, and among the heralds conveyed out there, TPLF is a Trojan horse of the US and other Western allies of TPLF, and TPLF is proxy to the West, and TPLF is receiving aid and weaponizing aid. And again, the Western superpowers are just working and fighting against Ethiopia for the sake of controlling the Horn of Africa are among the heralds. Of course, since the get-go of the war, your council had been working a lot, especially in demonstrating, in telling the realities, even in front of the White House by going to there. Can you just tell us the impact of having such demonstration in telling the reality for those who meddle in Ethiopian sovereign affairs?
Yeah, so the fight against this narrative and influencing the US foreign policy and domestic policy against Ethiopia is not just the marching to the White House, it's part of that. So we have several strategies, like I explained earlier, in the campaigns we do. But the demonstration, especially on the No More movement, has touched a nerve, because I do believe that's one of the things that the Biden administration is really seriously concerned. Because if you remember, out of the demonstration, the No More movement was so strong that they even came in Ethiopia and somehow the demonstrations were canceled. Because what happened was we were able to mobilize the voter. And that's the most important thing here. What the demonstrations do is, look, we're warning you, respect Ethiopia's sovereignty. Next time a democratically elected government takes power in Africa, respect it. So we went out and showed them, not just by shouting in demonstration or tweeting or talking to the senator's office, but we actually did significant blow to the Republican Party when we went in Virginia last year and defeated the democratically elected governor when he did not vow to support Ethiopia. We took him out of office. When we told them that, they didn't believe it. But guess what? Washington Post reported that the number of Ethiopian and Eritrean American put together handed a humiliating defeat to the governor of Virginia. So after that, it was a shock and awe. Literally, they really did not want us to demonstrate. They, in fact, believe it or not, I got to tell you this, one of the sanctions that they wrote, S3199, I believe, says in there, I will read it to you, it's staggering. Section 10 says the United States international community should seek to hold accountable governments, organizations, individuals, including those in the diaspora, who have incited a civil conflict and related violence in Ethiopia and or spread disinformation as part on behalf of a foreign government, political party, ethnic group, or organization to further the civil conflict or incite anti-American sentiment in Ethiopia. So basically, they're coming after me, they're coming after you in this sanction. So they can, and it is very broad, it's very subjective. So what you're saying is your demonstration, your activism, your TV rallies, your tweeting campaign, your YouTube, it's really making a huge impact in the US. So we're going to shut you down. So this is how you see it's very, very impactful.
Thank you. Of course, you've been demonstrating and hosting, ushering a big rally, and you ignited the rally and demonstration stuff in different parts of the world where diasporas of Ethiopia live. Not only that, the last straw is going to be the upcoming November 8th election, right? And you're going to penalize those who are working against Ethiopia. Please tell me about that. What are you going to do with senators and congressmen who are rashly running to sanction Ethiopia so far?
Very good question. Actually, I think you're reading our minds. So that's exactly what we're doing. Yeah. Every Wednesday, Voices for Ethiopia with Dr. Gunno has a program every Tuesday. Sunday at 6 p.m. we come on Space, Twitter Space, and talk about who to vote for, who not to vote for. So you become effective when you vote in block. So it's not just I am going there to vote, but you vote for your interest. And voting in the United States as Ethiopian bloc for the cause of Ethiopia is very effective. We're organizing that. And so Ethiopian American Civic Council, Deacon Yosef Teferi just issued a press release supporting all of candidates in the House of Representatives and Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, that are running against those people that sponsored HR 6600, and those senators and Congress alike that sponsored S on the Senate, S3199, HR 66 on House of Representatives. So we picked our candidates. We are telling Ethiopian Americans and Eritrean Americans to go and vote them out. Are we going to be successful? I think we are, because the population is really big. One side of the story is that a lot of the people that used to advocate with us are not actually no longer advocating with us because of all the killing that happened in the southern part of the country, which is very upsetting to everybody. But we believe, because Ethiopia is in such a dire state right now, it's do or die. This is a very decisive moment for the survival of Ethiopia. So we need to let them know that we're here, just like the Jewish people do. We're going to vote in a block, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, the Ethiopian government went a long mile to wrap up this ongoing conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia. Is the diaspora who live abroad successfully accomplished their tasks alongside of the Ethiopian military and Ethiopian government in fighting this proxy war?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
How do you exactly evaluate your performance?
We've been, well, our performance, I think we're winning. Seriously, I mean, let me tell you something, to tell you the truth. Diakon Yosef always says this. During Iraq, okay, when Iraq was attacked with weapon of mass destruction, there was no weapon of mass destruction. They just lied about it. No Iraqi American went out to demonstrate. They didn't have Twitter. They didn't have Facebook. Nobody knocked on the senators or Congress doors and say, don't attack Iraq. Same thing for Syria. Same thing for Libya. In fact, they were really afraid, Libyan Americans. There are not a whole lot of Libyan Americans like we are. We're here. I guess, God knew this, and in the 80s sent millions of diaspora from the 80s on to now to the US and the West. So now we are here for Ethiopia. And our movement is one of the strongest movement in the diaspora ever. There was a stronger movement that you see with Cuban Americans in Florida. But what happened with Cuban Americans is that they only work with the Republican Party. So they're kind of isolated, but Ethiopians are spread out. And we do advocate, and we have become extremely successful. And one of the largest voting bloc, actually, from Africa, I would venture to say, is Ethiopia. So we need to convince our African American brothers and sisters in this country to go along and vote with us. We also need to convince Africans back home that, hey, we fought alongside your individual country. In fact, you were so moved and by that you changed your flag to look like Ethiopia's flag, right? So let's remind them of that. Let's do some PR work to remind our African brothers and sisters to stand with us in time of need. Surely they know TPLF is a terrorist. Surely TPLF has gone out and said they are a terrorist. They work with terrorist organizations. Surely the United States has coded TPLF in the 1990s as a terrorist organization. They know. And so our fight is based on fact. Currently, for the question you asked me, everybody is standing alongside with Ethiopian military, alongside with the flag and the sovereignty integrity of Ethiopia. Nobody in the diaspora really wants Ethiopia to be cut in pieces. So we are advocating that the unity needs to be strengthened a little bit more. Because people have, like I told you, because of the massacres that happens in different parts of the country, people have been divided, but we need to put people together in unity to save Ethiopia, because that's what matters.
Okay, I do have my own reason that I asked such a question. I asked you that South Africa is ushering an ongoing peace talk between the federal government and TPLF in South Africa, which is led by African Union. But funny enough, the West has got wrong impression about Africa. Of course, you might heard about this. Let me read for you. Few weeks ago, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell was heard on media describing Europe as a garden and the rest of the world as a jungle. Were you surprised upon hearing this from one of top EU officials, and what does this imply about the attitude of Western powers to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I was shocked. So is everybody else. But we are the lion in the jungle. So it's a story of David and Goliath, really. When I think about it, there's a sense of superiority complex, and the way, even the fact that they dismiss the story of Ethiopia against TPLF and TPLF against Ethiopia, the way they narrate it is wrong. They don't seem to have an understanding of Africa. They don't know the culture, the history. They don't understand our psyche, how we think, how we live, and they don't care. Of course, they colonized most of Africa, right? So for them, it's still a jungle, not just Africa, but every southern part. You think about India or Southeast Asia or South America, they treat it pretty much the same way. It's Europe, and they feel like they're superior. But that's not the reality on the ground. The reality that as Africa is going to be a power to contend with in a few years, I predict. So to answer your question, that is their assertion. They seem to generalize about Ethiopia. And that's one of the reasons they don't listen to us, is because they think African governments are dictators. Even, the wall, I guess the New York Times TPLF reporter said he was such under, scrutiny. And he said, well, I mean, governments have a propaganda, so this is a propaganda machine. So they don't believe that Ethiopian government is democratically elected. This is just, they turn their back in a democratically elected government. So basically they don't care, they don't understand, and they think that they're the center of the world. And that's always been the case because they colonized everybody else. So Ethiopia wasn't colonized, but they don't seem to care. Yeah, so that we've started a petition for his removal.
Okay.
Yeah, the petition is doing really well.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And then God, for some reason, is paying back to Ethiopia's enemies. As I had to tell you, Menendez, the person that wrote the S-3199, yesterday it was announced that he's been investigated for criminal activity, for corruption. So this is a very serious charge that was levied on him yesterday. And so look at that, look at Joseph Bora. God always watches out for Ethiopia.
Okay, one last question before you leave. As we've said, of course, you have reflected on it, the demonstration and grand rallies in different towns and cities and waradas in Ethiopia. In the meantime, and diaspora abroad, what does it tells for Ethiopian government?
For Ethiopian government, it shows that actually Ethiopia is, I told you earlier, Ethiopia is negotiating from a position of strength because her people in every single state went out in support of the government. It's significant. And in addition to that, at the same time, we did our rally and demonstration here. It paints a picture, right? If anybody is listening out there, it paints a picture that the democratically elected government in Ethiopia should be able to operate because it has the mandate of the people. Democracy doesn't work without the people. It's a government for the people, by the people. If the people leave you, you're not going to function as a democracy. The demonstrations clearly illustrate that Ethiopia has the utmost support from its own people, its own citizens, to get rid of the TPLF. You can sit down and interview every single person would tell you that they are tired of the terrorist group and they want them gone. I don't know what the West is envisioning, that TPLF is going to come back in some sort of power structure to share some sort of power. I just don't see that at all. Okay. I mean, they've caused so much damage. So the Ethiopian people have demonstrated and let the world know, and Ethiopian government know, that they are in full support to get rid of TPLF. That's how I see it.
Okay, Asqual Tafri, Public Relation Officer of Ethiopian American Civic Council and staunch advocates of the reality. And always you're standing for Ethiopia. Anyway, thank you very much for your analysis and insight on current affairs. Have a nice time. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care, and may God bless Ethiopia.
Dear viewers, this brings you the end of our edition for today. See you next time with another edition. Bye-bye. Take care.